Okay, another structure you see in back of me also is very historic in many ways also. Now we're about 6 miles from the Turk's Head, Westchester. Okay, the building you see in back of me is a house. It was built in 1760. Now we're about 50 yards to my right is the Lancaster Pike. Now this pike would have been a main artery used by locals. A lot of people from going to Lancaster would use this. It was called the Lancaster Pike because it basically followed the Great Valley about 20 miles to 30 miles to Lancaster. Now the route in front of me was a dirt road. It was probably a bigger dirt road because it was used very frequently by travelers. Now we're going to talk about this later, but one of the taverns that Washington assembled his army is located on the Lancaster Pike. Now this house is a little bit further south of the tavern we're going to see next. Now the significance about this house, it's called the Zook House. The Zook House, this is a tract of land that was purchased in 1679. It was given to a Quaker by William Penn. It was called the Welsh Tract at that time. This was about 300 acres of land that was given to this family, probably purchased from William Penn. The house was constructed in 1760. Now, its construction's a little bit different than other Chester County buildings. It's sandstone. It's a different stone. It was probably maybe a quarry in the area that was easier to quarry. Now, these walls in this house are 2 feet thick. They're a little bit thicker. Maybe the building was a little bit different. Now, being constructed by it was being constructed by people from Lancaster. A lot of the Amish and Mennonites, they lived here. This was their house. It was built out of sandstone, maybe their type of construction. Now, as you can see here in back of me, this little structure here with 2 windows, a door, and another window, this was the original house. This was the house that was constructed in 1760. Now, there's a couple additions. I'll pan over and show them to you. One addition was built in 1800, and the next addition was built in 1820. Now these additions were added onto the house. As you can see, the house was extremely small. You know, if you had an extended family or you wanted a tavern in your business, you had to add on to your residence. Now the family, the original structure here that you see, basically what happened was a lot of these Amish and Mennonites were coming into Philadelphia. Now this was a route directly into Lancaster. So they would come down this road, and they heard from the locals that there was an Amish Mennonite that took them in for the night. So a lot of Amish and Mennonites spent the night in here on their way to Lancaster. Now the gentleman, Mr. Zook himself, he was a Mennonite, and he also was a part of that society, but he lived in this area. All right, the house you see right here, this whole structure behind me has been moved. This is not the original location. Now, as you can see, I'm in Exton, Pennsylvania. There's a mall behind me. It's called the Exton Square Mall. Now, when this mall was constructed in 1971 or 72, this structure had to be moved. It was about 300 yards further back, probably most likely in the parking lot where the mall is today. Now, what's sad about moving a historic structure like this is that the original basement does not survive. What they have to do is they have to make a new foundation for the building to put on top of it. So the original basement with this building has been lost to history. Now this was put on the National Historic Registry in 1971. It is a protected site. It was used for many years as basically a tea house. Then it was a museum, and now it's up for lease again. But it's a very historic structure. If you notice, you'll see some wood beams sticking out of the side of the building. Now that's where the floor joists would have been. They stuck them there so that the next floor on top, the boards on top, would have been laid on top of that. Now that type of construction you don't see with Quaker buildings. It's a different type of construction. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pan over, I'm going to show you some of the 1800 and 1820 additions. Okay, behind me here you'll see another building here. Basically what we have here is another structure. It has 3 windows, and then it has 2 windows and a door. Now this looks a little different than colonial. It's post-colonial. It's 1800. It's completely different. A lot of times the colonial buildings would have the door offset. Now a lot of the buildings around 1800 to about 1840 had the door facing right in the middle of the house. Now I don't know why they did this, but the construction's larger, as you can see. It's definitely a bigger structure. Now, the Zook family had 7 generations live in this house. Now, the reason why it was expanded was that the family grew. I mean, you had your daughters, your sons, and you know, most likely their wives lived here until they could get a tract of land for themselves. Now, the Amish were hardworking people, even back then. They still are today. And they would have farmed this land heavily. The land I'm standing on was donated by the Historical Society. And like I said, it's on the National Register of Historic Places, right behind me here. Now this building here is a little bit different. If you notice, the stones are different. A lot of these quarries that were quarried, probably the 1760 for the original structure, probably weren't around, or they may have grew over. They went to another quarry and they quarried different stone. It's still a sandstone. It probably was most likely quarried in the same area, but it's a different color. Gives it an offset of the building. Now I'm going to pan around and show you the kitchen. They actually, because the family, it was growing, they had to install a kitchen onto it. That would be on the right-hand side. Okay, I'm going to stand over here. I'm actually showing you some of the mall over here also to give you some aspect on where this building is. It's actually right in the mall. It's right on the mall. It would have been about 300 yards, like I said, behind. You know, this is the Exton Mall. But they preserved it. They took this building and they restored it. They restored it in 1970 or 71. It took 2 years to restore it. Now this building right here with the pillars, and then it's another, you know, it's a local stone also. That would be the kitchen. That's where they did all the cooking. There would be a beehive stove there. Now, what you see here is pretty much what it looked like. It would have been basically a little different. The original structure also would have a beehive. Now let me go over what a beehive oven was. We saw this in, if you remember, Martin's Tavern. We were looking at the fireplace. There was like an arch, a small arch, and a hole. Now that was made usually for bread. They would stick bread into the oven. They would have logs back there, and it would heat up this oven that looked like a beehive. You would see them outside the building. It was kind of an arch. So basically what they would do is they would make their bread early in the morning, usually. They would cook it in the beehive oven. This was done over here in this building also. Now as being, you know, as far as, you know, these Mennonites, or, you know, not Quakers, but they were Mennonites, they would, you know, make bread. Most likely they would give bread to travelers that would come up and down this road. They would sell bread. They were so close to the road that it was most likely that they actually sold goods along the road. So what we're looking at is a different type of stone also. This is an 1820s restoration. Not restoration, but it's the original building that was restored. And you know, it has rooms upstairs. So as the family grew, 7 generations, they actually added on to their house in 3 sections. Now this house has been beautifully restored. You know, like I said before, a lot of these structures don't exist. We have some structures that seem to have been gone forever. One of them, historic building, is the Boot Tavern. Now the Boot Tavern saw a lot of action during the Revolutionary War. This was, unfortunately, this was torn down many years ago, and I don't want to say this, but a CVS was put up, a drugstore was put up there where the spot was. Maybe, unfortunately, it just didn't make the registry of the historic places. But this building did, and it stands here today as a testament to the you know, people back in the day, not just today, but you know, back in the 70s and 60s they tried to restore these buildings, and I'm glad they did, or we wouldn't have them. But this is the Zook house. Its original structure was from 1760, and it's on the Lancaster Pike, and it's an interesting structure, and it's survived that many years because people would like to preserve these buildings.